Darkcast Network. Welcome to the dark side of podcasting.
Darkcast Network. Come to the dark side of podcasts. We have cookies.
Cookies? Me love cookies.
Hey there, Rainbow Warriors. I'm CJ, host of Beyond the Rainbow, True Crimes of the LGBT. My episodes focus on crimes committed by and against the LGBTQ community. I've covered cases you probably have heard of, such as Matthew Shepard, Brandon Tina, and the Orlando Pulse nightclub massacre, as well as some lesser-known cases like the murder of Ray Hainish, the Australian gay beat murders, and the suspicious disappearance of Lisa Lynn Stone. I cover cases brought to me by listeners like Penny Brummer, who I believe was wrongfully convicted, taboo cases such as lesbian corrective rape and murder in South Africa, and Pray the Gay Away camps. I discuss gay serial killers, women who pretend to be men to hook up with other women, and trans murders. I'm opinionated and uncensored. I know I'm not everyone's cup of tea, but surely I'm someone's shot at tequila. No matter what your gender or orientation in life might be, please join me as I tackle rainbow crimes in search of unicorn justice. Remember, it's not a crime to be gay, unless you're a murderer.
Devil is on his way. Devil is on his way, motherfucker. The devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Fall to your knees. Devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way.
Mountain Murders is an Appalachian true crime podcast. Some content may not be suitable for all listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
We say fuck a lot. Hey y'all, welcome back to Mountain Murders. I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
I'm driving the struggle bus right now, Dylan.
Is that what's going on?
First of all, your microphone has like shit the bed or something. It's barely hanging on. We don't know what's happening. I think it's just about to die.
Well,
R.I.P. microphone.
It's a little long in the tooth.
We've had it for a couple years, yeah.
Yeah, a few years. Shit.
The order of the day, Dylan, is that you have to speak directly into the microphone. You can't be a mush-mouth bitch.
You mean I have to enunciate?
I know it's difficult for you.
Yeah, I think I'm going to sound weird this episode, but it's all we can do.
We apologize.
We apologize. We will order new mics.
I think I finally kicked this cold for the most part, though I'm still coughing and shit.
You're still choking on your own snot.
But at least I won't have a cough drop this episode. So winning. But school's kicking my ass. The semester just started. And I think I'm in over my head a little bit.
It's like I told you. I think it's just you're not used to being a student. It's been a while. It's been some years, many years since we've been out of school. When's the last time you took a test?
Well, just a couple years ago. I haven't been on to school that long.
Well, I don't know.
A couple years ago, I attempted a major that I don't know why. It was awful and I sucked at it. Well, I don't know. I just spent like 8 hours today working on 2 assignments. And I feel like if you do online classes, and maybe I'm wrong here, but I feel like if you do online classes, they give you so much more work than if you just went to class and got assignments. Like if you attended a class every 2 days or whatever.
Yeah, honestly, I think...
Because it should not take me 8 hours to do 2 assignments. I'm sorry.
No, and I think it is... it's like almost like every teacher has an online style, if you will.
Yeah, it's not very cohesive like with the other teachers. some of these people are very disorganized. Like I didn't even know where to go find my homework because you would think it's listed under the assignments tab, but when you go there, there's nothing.
Right.
And then it was like hidden somewhere in the syllabus, and it took me like 30 minutes to figure out what I was supposed to be doing. Yeah, it's really frustrating. So I don't know. I'm trying here. That's why the episode's a little bit late. I've spent the last like 5 days, 8 hours a day trying to get like homework done.
Well, and I need to be able to ask questions, right? I need the instant feedback.
Oh gosh.
And the back and forth over the emails, that just doesn't work for me.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So, anywho,
Enough about me. Let's talk about me some more.
enough about Heather Snot.
Yeah, I know.
Right.
All right. Would you like to get into this episode, Dylan?
Yes, I would. Very much so.
We're going to begin by talking about Rock Hill, South Carolina. It's located in York County. It is considered a suburb of Charlotte's metropolitan area. It's about 25 miles south of the city. Of course, over the last few years, there's been exponential growth to the Charlotte area. Tons of people moving to North Carolina, moving into the state, and people flooding the upstate as well. So you've got almost like a double the population in the last 20 years.
Yeah, a lot going on.
A lot going on. It's home to Winthrop University and has a rich history. Rock Hill was settled in the 1830s and 1840s, but once the railroad established and the town got a post office, that's when people were really attracted to the little town. At the start of the Civil War, half the residents, about 21,800, were enslaved peoples who worked in local cotton production. During the Civil War, Rock Hill was known as a Confederate transfer point, a place where supplies were moved. Local residents set up hospitals in their homes. Refugees fleeing the coastal blockade and Sherman's troops found safe haven in Rock Hill. By 1862, many of the farmers switched from growing cotton to corn as food supplies dwindled. After the war, the wealthy elite sold off their land just to stay afloat. Rock Hill made its mark during the Civil Rights Movement as the Friendship Nine held a sit-in at McCrory's lunch counter in 1961. Also in 1961, the first stop for the Freedom Riders in the Deep South was in Rock Hill. Civil rights leader John Lewis and another man stepped off the bus and were immediately beaten by a white mob.
Oh, my God.
It made national news. In 2002, Lewis spoke at Winthrop University, and he was actually given a key to the city at that time. By 2008, the mayor formally apologized to Lewis for the treatment of the Freedom Riders.
Hey, we're sorry that white mob beat y'all up.
So just to say all that is that this is a very southern town with deep roots and a lot of rich history. Maybe not always good history, but it remains part of, the fabric of America. So thought it was important to talk about.
No, but it's important and pivotal history in this country.
Pivotal.
Yeah.
Yeah. In 1997, Rock Hill had about 45,000 residents. And like I said, it's probably almost doubled by now. So it was still kind of small enough that things didn't go unnoticed. It was still a place where a lot of folks grew up there. You knew your neighbors. And, there's good and bad with that small town vibe.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of good that comes in a community like that. A lot of neighbors willing to help each other. They're not going to step over, someone laying on the ground on the sidewalk. Oftentimes, you don't have to look very far for help, even like if your car is broken down or.
Well, we're going to see how the good weighs out maybe the bad of living in a small town with what happens in our story. But also the bad is, people are always in your business. They know, which also kind of comes to play in our story as well. Small town problems. Taking us back to November 25th, 1997. Earl Robertson was late for work, and his wife, Terry, had failed to pick up a coconut cake she had ordered. A woman named Martha George, she was also known as Sissy, had the cake that Terry ordered. Sissy called Terry's longtime friend, a woman named Linda Weaver, to see where Terry might be. So we've already got a bit of a phone tree happening. Again, small town problems.
So Sissy's just dragging this coconut cake around?
Yes, Dylan. It's got like a collar
Yeah.
and a leash.
She's just dragging
It's kind of
this.
naughty. She's yelling at it.
I bet it's the best
The
cake.
cake's like, yeah, eat me, sissy.
That's a dirty cake.
Yeah. So she's, like you said, dragging this cake around. It's probably getting like a lot of debris and muck in it. Nobody wants to eat that kind of coconut cake.
Are you sure?
Well, I don't. So again, we've got Linda Weaver, one of Terry's very good best friends. And Sissy just wants to know, like, hey, have you seen Terry? Do you know where she might be?
Well, let's be honest.
She's got to come get this cake.
Yeah, because that's a lot of responsibility. Having a cake, taking a cake around.
Oh, man.
Taking care of the cake.
Babysitting the cake.
Yeah, because at any minute,
The little fucker could jump off the table, run around, wreak havoc.
It could get knocked over. Somebody
Could get
eat
knocked
it.
up.
Anything could happen to the cake.
Somebody could have sex with a cake.
Yeah, I
Like an
guess.
American Pie.
Yeah, everybody knows what you're talking about.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm so sorry. I forgot you're Mr. Comedy Writer over there. Oh, yeah. You're such a breeze with the jokes, Dylan.
I never thought that was that great of an idea to like have intercourse with a warm pie. I didn't think it was that funny, but the rest of the movie was.
Well, I'm sorry that you don't have a sense of humor. No, the funny part was just like his dad walking in on him. For me, it wasn't like, oh, he's having sex with a pie. It was more of the dad's reaction when he walks in and is just like horrified.
Right.
It's just the secondhand embarrassment that's kind of funny.
Okay.
Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. You should be explaining comedy to me,
Sometimes.
Mr. Jokester. Linda phoned Carolina Counseling, where Terry worked part-time, and told her manager, Debbie Brisson, about the cake. Man, there's a lot going on with this cake. Now, again, this is a very small town, so that can be a good thing or a bad thing. Everybody knows your business. Everybody knows by now that Terry's ordered a coconut cake.
And not claimed it.
People are judging her like, ugh, why didn't you get a carrot cake? Each person had tried calling the Robertsons' home, but had received no answer. The Robertsons' voicemail picked up on the very first ring. They tried to explain it away, like maybe Terry was on the phone, or perhaps some reason the couple had taken the phone off the hook. Still, they were alarmed. It was out of the ordinary for a couple that was so very predictable and ordinary to do this. It was just so not Terry and Earl.
See, young people nowadays, they don't even know what a busy signal is on a phone. You know what I
No.
mean? Like you're trying to call somebody, it's just busy, busy, busy. And some people would actually do that back in the day when they don't want to be bothered. You know, they're just over it for the day. They're taking what we didn't know then was actually a mental health day. They would just take the receiver off the hook and just lay it beside the phone. And then now their phone's not going to ring on their end. They're not going to be bothered.
Leave me the hell alone.
Yeah, just leave me alone. And you just keep getting a busy signal.
It was a cold November morning, just 2 days before Thanksgiving. Debbie Brisson tried reassuring herself that everything was fine as she drove to the Robertsons' Westminster Drive home, which was located in, a fairly upscale subdivision at the time. Earl was director of manufacturing at Spring Industries. Earl had scheduled an 8 o'clock meeting, so his colleague, Margie Johnson, I'm sorry, her name was Margie Jordan. I don't know why I keep wanting to call her Johnson. I kept typing out Johnson, and I'm like, stop, her name is Jordan. Margie Jordan was concerned when he didn't show up. Because, again, it's completely out of character for Earl, who is a creature of habit. I was going to say, Dylan, you probably work with people like this. They show up 30 minutes before work starts. They're ready to go. They've already had their coffee.
Right.
All that.
And you know what they're going to do before they do it.
But then you probably also work with people who are creature of habit and that they're not going to show up. They're not going to call in.
You know what? When someone comes in and to a work area and their boots aren't even laced up, I just lose all respect for them. I really do. And there's really no coming back from that.
Be ready.
It's like you're not ready to work.
No.
What if you had to work on your way into the building? What if all of a sudden some calamity happened?
See, I feel like all of that is like a lack of work ethic. Like when you show up for work, you should be ready to do your job. There shouldn't be all this extra dilly-dallying. I hit my snooze 50 times. I'm dragging in. I'm not prepared. That shit drives me crazy.
Yeah. I would always get tickled at the old mill I used to work in. People would get mad if you didn't have everything caught up so they could take a break as soon as they came into work. And I'm like, geez, dude, you like literally got here. What the hell's wrong with you?
See, that would drive me crazy. The 49-year-old was never tardy. He, like I said, arrived 30 minutes early for work every day and would certainly not miss a meeting without phoning in. Earl had worked at Spring Industries for 27 years and had never missed a day.
That's crazy.
Devoted employee. People at Spring Industries, the largest area employer, considered Earl to be brilliant. He was an engineer and had a certain nerdiness about him, yet Earl was also a, quote, Southern gentleman to his core. His role at Spring Industries was important as he oversaw all administrative functions for manufacturing. Unable to reach Earl, Margie Jordan called the York County Sheriff's Office. A patrol deputy named Maggart took the call and headed over to the Robertson home. He rang the doorbell, but nobody answered. He walked around to the carport on the side of the house and knocked on the door there. A small white dog was inside barking. Maggart looked through the window and noted the home appeared to be a normal middle-class household. You know, there was groceries probably, I'm thinking, for the Thanksgiving holiday on the table. You know, I mean, it just looked like a normal home.
Nothing to raise any type of alarm.
Not yet. A Cadillac and a Chevy van were parked in the driveway. When no one came to the door, Maggart walked around to the neighbor's house because there was a man working in his yard. And he asked, "Have you seen the Robertsons today?" The neighbor informed Maggart that if the, quote, red car was gone, Earl was gone. Earl Robertson usually got up early and arrived home late, so the neighbor was like, I don't ever see him in the morning. Like, he gets up super early and leaves. And the red car is like a little red Mazda. Maggart, who concluded all was well, was told to call Margie Jordan. However, Margie explained to the officer that Earl had never missed a day of work. She also added that the Robertson son had just gotten out of prison and moved back home, and she felt like something was off.
Oh, wow.
Now, that information changed Maggart's opinion, and he headed back to the house. Meanwhile, Debbie Brisson is arriving at the home. They kind of meet, you know, just Debbie gets there first, but they're kind of meeting almost at the same time. Terry's Cadillac was in the driveway, and the van, which was used primarily for road trips, Earl's car was gone. No one answered the side door. Debbie went around to the backyard where there was another door. It was kind of located leading into the basement, but it was just under Terry's bedroom window, so she thought if she knocked on that back door, Terry might hear her. Like if Terry was in the bedroom or the bathroom getting ready.
Right.
Yeah. However, the storm door was ajar, and the wooden door's glass was shattered.
Oh.
Debbie thought this was odd, but she went inside. The door was unlocked. Debbie walked through the basement, which was dark. It had been converted into a 2-bedroom apartment for the Robertsons' sons, who were in their 20s. She's calling out for Terry, but she just hears this dead silence. Completely eerie silence.
Now, would you go in, or would your first thought be scene integrity?
Well, she doesn't know anything's happened yet. I mean, this is her friend. A good friend. She feels comfortable enough walking in her home.
Well, no, I get all that. But would it something, a window of any sort being broken or the door ajar, would that unnerve you to any degree?
Yes and no. I think it would. But at the same time, you might think, well, they do have these young men living in the house.
Busy household.
They, could have accidentally hit the door with a ball or, something like that.
Some shenanigans.
Yes. Party, whatever. It was, okay, so at the top of the stairs, she walks down the hallway. She kind of rounds a corner and she starts to stumble over something and learns that it's Earl Robertson that she is tripping over.
Oh, God.
Yeah. He's lying face down. There was blood everywhere, and his skull was smashed. Earl was wearing only a pair of white briefs. Scared, Margie didn't know what else she might find in the home, and she was worried that the killer could still be in the house. She runs to the front door, but it's locked with a deadbolt and a key, so she can't even get it open because it's been locked with a key.
So it's not one of those that has a knob on the back.
Doesn't seem to be. She ran to the side door, but it was also locked with a key and a deadbolt. Debbie scrambled to find the telephone, but she realizes it's off the hook. And that's probably why no one was able to get them. She, rehangs the phone, and then she calls her boss and tells him what's happened. And he's like, girl, you need to call 911.
Yeah.
Debbie dialed the emergency line. I mean, this woman's frantic, so I can see where she's just scrambling like she doesn't have her wits about her.
Well, yeah, you've just discovered a bloody scene, a horrific scene.
And now you're like trapped in the house.
That would be one of the scariest parts. When you're trying to get out, you're not sure who's there, not there. I mean, but you can't just run outside. Yeah, that would freak me out.
So now as Debbie is on the phone with 911 and she's telling them what's happened, Deputy Maggart walks up and he can see Debbie inside the house, but she's motioning that the doors are locked and she can't let him in. I mean, she's just panicking, right? And he can tell like something is not okay. He directed her to a window and told her to unlock it, and he would help her like crawl through the window. He would pull her through it. And as the window opened, Debbie starts screaming, he's dead, he's dead. By 10 a.m., Maggart had called for backup. Debbie Brisson had stumbled into a real-life horror movie. Now, can you imagine, Dylan, you're just going over there to like tell your friend, hey, your cake's ready.
Take this damn cake
Which I'm
off
assuming
my
it's a
hands.
cake that was ordered for Thanksgiving.
Right. Yeah.
Inside, investigators found Earl Robertson in the same condition. Blood was pooled over blue carpet and just splattered on the walls. And I have a photo that I'll post on Instagram and on our Patreon. It is a lot of blood. I mean, it is very, very graphic blood. I mean, when I say that, it's a lot to take in. And so I'm just, when I saw the picture, I thought, oh my gosh, I can't imagine walking into this.
No, I could not. I couldn't. And you don't know how you would react in a situation like that either. You can say, oh, I'd never, or this and that. But until you're in the heat of the moment, there's just no telling how you would act.
Earl had suffered blunt force trauma. He had a mark on his back. It wasn't a bruise or a cut, but it was the size of a pipe, like down the center of his spine.
Can I say that blunt force trauma is got to be one of the worst ways to go?
Yeah, because imagine when you just like bump your head on something, like a cabinet door or the car door. I don't know why I have a really bad habit of like bumping my head on the car door all the time. And it hurts like hell.
Yeah, right. So I could not imagine someone hauling off and swinging an object as hard as they could and hitting me in the head.
I know. And then I'm always picture the scene in Casino.
Right.
With Joe Pesci and his brother in that cornfield, and they're just like beating them with pipes and shit. And just the thuds that you hear. I mean, it's just fucking horrible.
Right.
Now, Earl's hands were tucked underneath his body. Blood mist, it was kind of like a mist, like it had been sprayed from a bottle, was on the ceiling in dozens of little lines.
Streaks.
Like misted.
This is cast off.
Yes.
From the object.
Yeah. Nearby, they found a pair of jean shorts, a towel, and a pair of Jordan basketball shoes. A bottle of Tilex was propped up next to Earl's leg. As Maggart made his way into the bedroom, he uncovered another grisly scene. A kitchen knife with the tip broken was lying on a sheet in the middle of the bed, and he could see an arm sticking out of a pile of bedding that was kind of up against the wall. Like the bed was close to the wall, and there was like a body pushed between the bed and the wall, and all he could see was a hand sticking up out of this bedding.
Damn, and a bloody knife laying in the middle of the bed?
Terry was lying on her back between the wall and the bed. A blood-drenched comforter was pulled over her. It covered most of her body. She had deep cuts and stab wounds. Her throat was slit. Another deep gash sliced her open from ear to mouth. She was wearing a nightgown, and by the body, her purse was spilled out onto the floor, like someone had rummaged through her purse. Mackert, who had worked for 7 years in law enforcement, had been to other homicides, but he would say none were as brutal as this.
This sounds next level.
The violence was beyond surreal. One officer would later say, quote, Earl's head was crushed like a tomato. Horrible. Well, they secured the scene, and SLED, which is the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division or whatever, they provide forensic investigations for all the departments in South Carolina. They were brought in as well to help with the forensics. Detectives began interviewing neighbors. They learned the Robertsons had 2 sons, James, who was known as Jimmy, and Earl Jr., who was called Chip. James had been living in his parents' basement for 4 days.
How the hell you get Chip from Earl Jr.?
I don't know. Maybe he's just a chip off the old block. Earl Jr., right?
Yes.
Maybe. But his dad also played golf. So
Okay.
maybe it had something to do with that.
Maybe he had an incredible chip shot.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Maybe he enjoys potato chips.
Yeah. Maybe he won a casino chip.
Okay.
But
I
I
think
don't
we're
know.
out of chip references.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Because I can keep going. All right. James had been living in his parents' basement, like I said, for 4 days. He worked at Winthrop University's cafeteria. Chip was at Wharton Business School at the University of Pennsylvania and lived in Philadelphia. A blue Honda was parked at the edge of the Robertsons' grass and was traced to a man named Douglas Moon, who was an area truck driver. A neighbor had seen James Robertson before 8 a.m. that morning. James, or Jimmy, and a woman were loading something into the trunk of Earl's red Mazda. This was a car that Earl had purchased for Chip, but was now driving himself. Another neighbor told investigators that a year earlier, Jimmy Robertson had broken into his house and stolen a camcorder, television, jewelry, checks, and credit cards. Jimmy had also stolen the man's Toyota Celica, which, by the way, was a really hot car in the 90s.
Oh, Celica.
Dude, I wanted a Celica so bad.
They were so cool.
I got my driver's license.
But how do you deal with your neighbor's kid breaking into your house and stealing your shit?
Being pissed off, I guess. Be mad AF, bud.
I don't think I could. That would be something I could not get over.
Especially if they stole my Toyota Celica.
Yeah.
Beep, beep. Robertson had used a credit card to buy $2,800 worth of electronics at Sears. He had also written a check for to a florist for some roses.
Oh.
And
I bet he got a badass stereo system.
he bought like some TVs and VCRs. It sounds like stuff he thought he could pawn, maybe. And we'll get into that in a little bit. Some neighbors knew Jimmy Robertson as a troubled kid all along, while others hadn't really known and hadn't even really known about the breaking and entering, the robbery, the larceny, none of that. Law enforcement suspected the credit cards had been stolen from Terry's purse, since the purse was lying on the ground next to her body, and they needed to track those. Jimmy Robertson, who had once been a promising student at his father's alma mater, Georgia Institute of Technology, was fast becoming the chief suspect. A note had been left on the kitchen table among some groceries that read, quote, "Mom and Dad, gone to get Chip in his car. Sorry, but he needs me right now. Love, Jim."
Okay. Does that seem like a real note to you?
I'm just going to leave this note right here next to the cream of wheat, Mom.
Yeah.
Yeah. Probation officers had been at the Robertson house just the day before and had found marijuana. Jimmy had been written up for a probation violation. He was also written up for moving without permission because he's on probation. He lists one address. He's not supposed to move.
Well, if you do,
you're supposed to let your
run it
probation
by
officer,
them and let them know your new address.
You basically have to get permission for everything that you do when you're on probation, it sounds like.
Well, when probation actually is being done right.
Which is often not the case.
And nowadays it is.
There was a really big scandal in Asheville. Maniac guy killed a bunch of people and went on a crime spree and
was wearing an ankle bracelet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big scandal. So a be on the lookout was issued for the red Mazda car. Robertson was described as armed and dangerous. From his rap sheet, law enforcement could see that Jimmy Robertson had pleaded to 2 counts of grand larceny, second-degree burglary, forgery, and fraudulent use of a credit card. He'd been sentenced to 6 years in prison. He had stolen the items he claimed due to a drug addiction. In September of 1996, he was sent to Lee Correctional Institution in Bishopville, South Carolina, where he spent only 10 months in prison. 10 months of a 6-year sentence.
When you hear stuff like that, it makes you wonder why they even bother.
Well, the thing is, he was not released on good behavior because we'll talk about it more later, but he was a shitbird in prison.
Right.
Like he stayed in trouble the whole time he was in prison.
So this is a guy who should only serve 15% of their sentence or something.
Yeah. No, this is a guy who should serve his sentence and then some. He had been paroled 4 months earlier in July of 1997. Now, according to phone records, Jimmy had called Chip twice from the family's phone at 2:33 a.m. for 34 minutes, and then he had called Chip again at 3:07 a.m., and that call was just for a few minutes. The Philadelphia Police Department was dispatched to Chip Robertson's apartment to wait. What investigators found most disturbing about the homicides was the amount of rage the killer felt toward the victims. Strangers typically don't inflict that kind of brutality. It appeared to be an emotionally charged attack. Terry Robertson had been viciously stabbed even after death. The killer had just kept on slashing her body.
Jeez.
When Douglas Moore was tracked down, now he's the guy who owns the blue Honda Accord, he has no idea who Jimmy Robertson is. All he knew was the name and that Robertson had been a guy who worked with his daughter at Papa John's Pizza. In the early morning hours on Tuesday, a phone call between 1:30 and 2 a.m. had awakened Douglas Moon. His daughter Meredith told him she had the call, he should just go back to bed. And then in a few minutes, she comes to him and says she needs to take her best friend to the emergency room. Douglas asked if he needed to come too, and she told him, no, I've got it under control. It'll be fine. I'll be back in a little while. Now, when Douglas got up for work, Meredith was still gone. And it wasn't very long until these 2 deputies were knocking at his door. He panicked, thinking that Meredith had been in a wreck, but the deputies assured him it was much more serious than that.
Oh, God. Could you imagine?
No.
Like, you mean, no, sir, it's not a wreck. It's much worse.
The thing is, this situation and what so often I think gets pushed to the side in these types of cases is this ripple effect.
Right.
Of how it affects so many people in different ways, but it's still very impactful. So now you've got this guy worrying about his daughter. He doesn't know what to think. He's scared. News that his daughter, Meredith Moon, could somehow be wrapped up in the murder of the Robertsons, quote, hit him like a ton of bricks. He just could not believe it. He didn't know where she was or if she was still alive. And at that point, Douglas Moon is just totally in shock. I mean, can you imagine the police come to your house and they're like, hey, your daughter may be involved in a murder?
No, you'd never be prepared for that.
No. And the thing is, his daughter was a good girl, he explained. She had never gotten even a traffic ticket, had never been in trouble. She'd recently graduated from high school where she'd been in the Air Force ROTC program and had worked in various restaurants. She had plans or wanted to attend the University of Georgia to become a medical examiner. She was very interested in forensic science. Meredith was nearly 6 feet tall, but was overweight and had endured years of bullying growing up, often being called fatty or Kool-Aid man. Like people would say, hey, Kool-Aid or whatever, like when she'd walk through a building, which is ridiculous.
And she'd be like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No,
I mean,
that's so messed up. It really is.
And at that point, she weighed nearly 300 pounds. She was the kind of girl that people would describe as, well, she's got a pretty face.
Or she has a good personality.
As a child, Meredith's mother had taken her to Weight Watchers in the 5th grade because at that point she weighed 187 pounds.
You know that she has a pretty face. I mean, what? I've always been like, what? I mean, so like the rest of her's not, you know what I mean?
I don't get that.
I never got that. I never understood that.
Because I'm always just like, she's very pretty. I don't think about, well, she'd be really pretty if you put her face on a different body.
Or
I mean, I guess that just doesn't even occur to me. You know what I mean?
Or people would actually say shit like, if she lost some weight, she'd be pretty. Or just, you are who you are. I mean, really.
I agree.
I mean, you can make choices to affect it to a degree.
But, a lot of people are fighting genetics.
You really are. I mean, I am. My body settles down around 260 to 280 pounds. That's where my body, if I just am normal, that's where it likes to be at. Fat as fuck.
Yeah, I'm fighting middle age.
Yes.
And perimenopause, where my body just wants to take all the fat and put it right in my midsection.
Yeah, it's like we need to keep this fat.
Yeah.
We don't want to.
She may need an inner tubulator. She might need to go tubing down the river. Meredith's friend, who allegedly had this injury, her name was Erin. She told Douglas that they had spent several hours together the night before. She had not seen or heard from Meredith since then. Meredith had picked Erin up at Outback Steakhouse, and they'd hung out watching movies and playing a computer game. It was around midnight that Jimmy Robertson had invited them over. When the girls arrived, he was kind of cleaning up his apartment in the basement, saying that he had family coming over for Thanksgiving. The girls stayed for just a short while, and then they both went home. Now, around 3:30 a.m., Jimmy had called Erin looking for Meredith, but was told that Meredith had gone home and that she was at the condo, that she shared with her father. So Erin's basically confirming, like, I had no injury. She didn't take me to the emergency room. That's a fake story.
Okay.
It's fake news.
Nothing, no truth at all in that.
No. Like, we did hang out, but that's not at all what happened. And then we came home. Right. Now, after law enforcement left, Douglas Moon called his ex-wife, who lived in Duluth, Georgia. They had remained friends despite their divorce, and they spoke on the phone almost weekly. He explained that Meredith was missing and told her what he knew from the police visit, which really wasn't that much, except our daughter's missing and there's been a murder.
Damn.
Yeah.
And not that much, but a lot at the same time.
News spread at Spring Industries that Earl and Terry Robertson had been murdered, and everybody was stunned. I mean, Earl was known as a kind and caring man. Few people knew of the Robertsons' troubled son, though. Earl had always had a great deal of pride in his boys, bragging on them. Friends of the Robertsons weren't exactly surprised to hear that Jimmy might be the main suspect. Terry had confided in several of her girlfriends about her son's problems. The Robertsons were active members at the Oakland Presbyterian Church, which took care of their youth. They had a big youth group kind of program and did a lot of youth activities. Jimmy Robertson had participated in a Sunday after Christmas youth service only a few years earlier. That year, Jimmy and a few other college students had led a sermon on Babette's Feast. Their pastor, William Pender, didn't know what to think when he heard the news. Like everyone who knew the Robertsons, he was just in disbelief. I mean, these were very active people in the church. Pender spent the afternoon outside the Robertsons' home simply because he didn't know what else to do. His congregation had never experienced a tragedy like this, and he was really worried about Chip and Jimmy. When the media asked him about the situation, he said, quote, "It's a tragic loss of a wonderful family." Pender assumed that it was some kind of break-in and that random burglars had killed the couple. Earl's credit card first pinged at a peach stand in Fort Mill, South Carolina. Someone was using Earl's Visa to buy gasoline and fuel from the business. A clerk told investigators later that the couple who'd used the card looked happy as a lark, appearing as if they were on a date.
Okay. That can happen. Surprise a burglar and that something bad happens. But it's very, very seldom.
I was actually just thinking about the idea of a peach stand and how you see a lot of those in South Carolina and Georgia.
Yeah.
And I always want to stop because, they probably have some really delicious goodies.
They got the best peaches.
Boiled peanuts.
And if you do surprise a burglar and something goes down, it's not going to be a crime like this. It's not going to have this type of brutality. There's not going to be this, oh, this is definitely overkill in both cases, it sounds like. So I'm sure investigators which is obvious from your story, very quickly ruled that out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it takes a genius to figure out that, like, this does not, when you stumble upon this scene, it does not look like a burglary. Plus, there's nothing else missing.
Right.
What, just a few items from her purse? That's it? No jewelry? I mean, I think when they inventoried, she had like 82 pieces of jewelry. And not just like cheap jewelry, but like nice jewelry. Ended up being secured in a lockbox at a bank kind of jewelry.
So thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars worth of jewelry.
Very likely. Now, this couple had told the clerk that they were on their way to pick up the man's brother and go on a vacation. The store's surveillance tape showed Robertson and Moon standing at the cash register together, just la la la.
Getting some peach jam.
I got some jams and jellies and I'm just ready to party. A calling card showed that Meredith had placed a call to her best friend, Erin, the one she'd been with the night before all this happened, from a rest stop on I-85 just north of Charlotte. Then the credit card was used again in the afternoon near Ladysmith, Virginia to buy gas once more. Interviews with Jimmy's friends revealed more information. They said Jimmy had made hostile remarks about his father and would say stuff like he wanted to put cyanide in his tea. Once, he claimed he did it, but had taken the glasses away at the last minute. Friends didn't know if Jimmy was telling the truth or just talking. He talked about burning his parents' house down. Friends said that Earl was, quote, a tightwad who got onto Jimmy for wasting money and degraded Jimmy for working low-paying jobs. Earl, who made a good income, lived frugally, driving older model vehicles. Yet he had considered investing money into a golf course because he was this avid golfer. Golf was his passion. Jimmy had been upset by this, telling friends it would mean less money for his inheritance.
Yeah, I don't get that attitude when you see that in these stories. Because that's your dad's wealth.
Your dad worked his ass off.
And
He's
it sounds,
working from dark till dark.
Yeah. It sounds like he's worked his way up the corporate ladder.
Has lived frugally.
Yeah, and to even have money to invest, because, some people make a large sum annually, but they spend it all as fast as they can get it. And they're in debt to their eyeballs, and they're basically living paycheck to paycheck just like anyone else, or like a lot of other people, rather. But, it's not, and it's, I just don't get it, what right you have to your parents'
No,
wealth.
I've never understood people who had that mindset of like, what am I going to inherit? What do I get?
My inheritance.
I've never thought about that. Probably because my parents are broke, but still, and they hate me. So they're probably not going to leave me anything, but.
No. Only if paperwork was forgotten to be changed.
Exactly.
Will you ever get anything? And I'm not going to get anything like that either. But, I mean, if it was a good investment and a long-term investment, buying into a golf course or whatever, that would benefit you as well. So, I mean, it's just, I don't know, it seems very short-sighted when you have young people like this just kind of hovering around waiting for their parents to die so they can get the house.
There's something so weird about that. Like adults, and I'm not saying like you can't be an adult and live at home, because there's a lot of circumstances, a lot of reasons why people live at home as adults. They're caregivers to their parents. They're in some financial thing.
Sometimes it just works for everybody.
Sometimes it does just work for everybody. Maybe you're throwing in on the bills or the rent and you're helping out.
Maybe your mom or dad doesn't want to be alone, or there's a million good reasons.
But I have known people who like live at home with their parents, and it's not for like good reasons. It's because they don't want to move out and pay bills.
Right.
Right. And they are like little vultures swarming, like rubbing their little hands together, like waiting for their parents to die so they can take over everything.
So
when I see those people and I recognize what they're doing, I'm just like so grossed out by it.
Then you can bring a girl home and not have to tell her to be quiet.
Yeah, like sneaking a girl in your parents. I don't know. It's just fucking weird. It's so weird to me because they literally are just like waiting waiting for the prey.
Then I can move into the master bedroom.
Yeah.
Where my mom and dad freaking screwed all those
Just
years.
wait till I get in that garden tub.
I don't even have to change a mattress.
Ew.
What?
So gross.
Hey, I don't want to
Oh.
go and like sleep in a room where my mom and dad were banging all those years.
Ah.
Do you?
No. Definitely not.
No.
There's no way.
No.
In addition to Jimmy's criminal history, he had a lot of traffic violations, which got his license suspended. He had only a state-issued ID, which he'd got a month earlier. And when I'm talking about traffic tickets, you wouldn't even believe the number of traffic tickets this guy racked up for speeding, reckless driving, like just all sorts of shit, running stoplights. Like probably 20 traffic tickets.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, everybody get pinched for speeding here or there, or maybe you did a slow roll through the stop sign or stoplight and they get you. But when it's just over and over again, I think it just shows you someone who doesn't respect
Shitbird?
It doesn't respect authority, doesn't worry about people around them. Careless and reckless driving charges, you usually got to do some pretty dumb shit, some dangerous stuff to get a charge like that. That's a serious charge.
It's true. And we'll talk more about those traffic violations in a minute. Now, by 8 p.m., Jimmy and Meredith arrived at Chip Robertson's apartment in Philadelphia. 4 officers were waiting for them. They were jerked from the Mazda and had guns held to the back of their heads.
So basically, they knew where they were going the whole time.
Yes.
And they were simply waiting for them to get there and watching them go with the electronic trail through the credit cards.
Law enforcement was tight-lipped with details. The newspaper headlines reported the couple had been slain in their home, but the truth was police didn't have a lot of information to share. I mean, they were pretty tight-lipped, but it's because they didn't have a lot of information. They were kind of piecing it together, but they didn't know, did Jimmy do this? Like, what's the motive? They didn't have all that info. And it happened so fast,
Right. And they just had a theory as to what had happened.
Friends and coworkers described Earl and Terry as wonderful people. Earl was a focused and dedicated employee. Terry was gregarious and charming. This was all written in the newspaper. Earl's mother, Christine, who was 84 years old, lived in Georgia, and she told law enforcement that she suspected something like this might happen. Earl had told his mother that the least little thing would set Jimmy off. Christine had even told a friend recently, quote, he might go in there and kill them all.
Oh, my God. That's a terrible way to think about your grandchild.
Chip Robertson had been questioned 4 hours before his brother arrived and was arrested. Investigators suspected that Chip might be involved too, since Jimmy had phoned him before their parents were found dead. Chip didn't waver and kept saying he didn't know anything. Jimmy hadn't told him anything. When he got back from the police station, a care package had arrived that had been sent by Terry, his mother, that had a honey-baked ham inside.
Wow.
He told the Charlotte Observer, quote, they were the best in the world about his parents.
Damn, yeah, they mail them hams, bro. I wish somebody mailed me a ham.
I know. I like honey-baked hams in my mouth.
Yeah.
Chip and his grandmother, Christine, ended up taking care of the funeral for Earl and Terry. The couple would be buried in Milledgeville, Georgia, near where Terry's parents lived, but they would have the funeral in Rock Hill. Friends speculated about Jimmy, saying they didn't know what went wrong. Earl and Terry had been ideal parents. Earl was always playing basketball with the boys out in the driveway, and Terry had been a Cub Scout den mother. They were very loving, doting parents, always bragging on their boys, supportive of anything the boys wanted to do, all the sports, all the teams. The week following the murder, leading up to the funeral, SLED and local law enforcement spent that time building a case against Jimmy and Meredith. And it wasn't long before Meredith started talking. For a long time, Jimmy had discussed killing his parents, saying they were worth a few million. Meredith, like his other friends, hadn't, really taken him seriously. It seemed more like empty threats when he was angry, and they were mostly aimed at his father. Jimmy explained his plan to Meredith before the murders took place, saying that he was going to let Earl get into the shower and that's when he would kill his mother. Then when Earl got out of the shower and came down the hallway, Jimmy would kill him.
Wow, that sounds like exactly what he did. And now, if you had a friend who was like making these quote unquote empty threats, you thought, I would still find it very disturbing if someone's constantly talking about killing their parents or violent things like setting the house on fire.
So around this time, like 3:34 in the morning, he calls and tells Meredith to come over. He's like, pack your bags. We're going to Philadelphia. So she packs a bag and goes to the house. She's sitting downstairs in the basement apartment. He's saying, this is my plan. He's telling her what he's going to do. And then they heard the shower upstairs. That's when Jimmy grabs a baseball bat and runs upstairs. So Meredith is sitting downstairs on the couch, but she can hear the struggle upstairs. Terry's screams were so loud, but Earl couldn't hear them because he didn't want to wake his wife, so he didn't shower in their master bathroom. He would go to another bathroom to shower because he got up so early in the morning. So he couldn't hear her screaming. And Meredith said the screams were so loud she covered her ears and eventually had to go step outside so she didn't have to listen to it.
Okay, so you're just going to wait around while your boyfriend murders his parents?
Well, at some point, Jimmy asked Meredith if she would get a knife from the kitchen, which she did. When Jimmy came back downstairs, he was covered in blood. He stuffed some clothing into a bag, took a shower, and also placed a bat, a hammer, and some kind of liquid that he said, quote, helped people pass a drug test in this bag. What is this amazing liquid and why don't I know about it?
I think it's called other people's pee.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe
Yeah.
that's what I don't know. Not that I need one. I'm not trying to pass a drug test.
Now, I can pass one.
Also, I'm a good girl.
I'm pretty proud of that.
I'm a good girl. I'm a real boy. Okay, so he's packing up all this shit, throwing it in this bag, and then I guess he's packing up his little suitcase or what his little travel bag. And when they finally left the house, it was 7:45 a.m. As they're loading stuff in the car, getting ready to leave, Jimmy takes a rake and breaks the downstairs window on the door and tells Meredith it'll look like a break-in.
Yeah, that'll do it.
So as they were driving through Maryland, Jimmy threw the bag away, like into a dumpster. Detectives, when they heard this information, called the Maryland State Police and asked them if they would go check that dumpster for this evidence. And by the way, they do recover it.
It was still in the dumpster?
Yeah.
Wow.
Because this is all happening like pretty quick.
No, this is happening very quickly.
Yes. And so the next day, it was Thanksgiving Day. And that's when Meredith signed a confession and went to jail. She had to await extradition to South Carolina. Jimmy was without emotion during his interrogation. He didn't respond to any information that Meredith had given up during her interview. Instead, he would only say, quote, only two people know what happened in that house, Meredith and me, and the truth will come out at the right time. So he's trying to throw her under the bus, I guess.
But she's telling her version of the truth, bud.
Bail was denied the next day for both Meredith and Jimmy. Jimmy started showing signs of trouble from an early age. The family was living in Michigan during his elementary school years, and he was kind of considered a weird kid at that time. When they moved to South Carolina, that didn't change. The Robertsons' family friends and their children, who were around the same age as Chip and Jimmy, didn't often want to hang out or be around Jimmy because of his bad behavior. He wet the bed until he was 12, and due to his small size, other kids made fun of him. He was never really part of the group. One teacher told Terry that Jimmy was troubled and would end up in prison or a grave. This greatly offended Terry, who screamed, "There's nothing wrong with my son."
Okay. Well, it's hard to take criticism like that about your children sometimes, I guess.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people are very much in denial. But I think educators, people who have degrees in childhood development, they kind of know when a kid is a problem.
Well,
and that it's not just typical kid behavior.
No, and I would find it disturbing.
Like if you take a pencil and stab a child in the eye with it. Like, that's not normal.
It's just boys being boys.
That's not fighting over who gets to color with the blue crayon.
Yeah, I would be disturbed, and I think I would want to follow up or, explore that more if someone came to me, telling me something like that about my child.
By the time he was in like junior high and early high school, they suspected that Jimmy was using drugs and alcohol, but they always bailed him out of trouble. Like, anytime he got in trouble, mom and dad were there to save the day. Once at school, he was ordered to clean the bathroom because of some incident. He'd gotten into trouble. That was his punishment. Terry showed up and did it herself instead of making Jimmy clean the bathroom as punishment.
Now, could you imagine nowadays if they tried to dole out that type of punishment?
This was like a private school.
People would flip out. Oh my God, you can't have my kid cleaning your bathrooms. This is so wrong.
Despite his issues, Jimmy also had some successes, like earning his way to Eagle Scout. He was accepted into a 4-week program at the Governor's School for Math and Science. Prestigious. And he won a year-long scholarship to study abroad in Germany. He loved Germany. He had complete freedom. His parents were sending him $1,000 a month allowance. In the 90s?
Damn.
It's a fortune. And he could drink as much as he wanted. This was kind of the first time Jimmy felt like he had friends. Was like living in Germany. He graduated from Northwestern High School in 1992 and enrolled at Georgia Institute of Technology, where his father had earned an undergrad degree. Now, Jimmy's GPA was only 1.5 after his first semester.
I don't think I've ever heard of one that low.
He had like straight D's.
So that's not trying, basically, right?
Earl had graduated first in his class and was horrified at how badly Jimmy had performed. Many of the professors at the school, Earl had, as a teacher himself, and or he knew them just professionally. Yeah.
So this is more than just a parent being disappointed in their child's performance. He's actually embarrassed.
Yes.
Because he knows some of these people that his son's dealing with.
Yeah. Jimmy took lighter course loads the next semester, but still earned terrible grades. And by the end of his sophomore year, his GPA was 1.31.
Oh, wow. He brought it up.
No, he brought it down. It was down like by 0.2 points.
Oh, it was 1.5 earlier?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought it was 1.05. Sorry.
Jimmy was also forging checks. Like, he would steal his parents' checks and make himself out checks for $500-$600 at a time. He was spending up to $1,000 at a time on video poker machines. And he was racking up motor vehicle violations. Friends told the Robertsons they needed to try a tough love approach. Earl was on board with this, but Terry was not, and it caused a huge rift in their marriage. Because Earl's like, we gotta kick him to the curb, make him grow up, and Terry's like, we can't do that, he's just a baby.
I mean, how many times have we heard this very story?
Well, as parents, I believe as a parent, and I've tried to do this with my son's father. Even though we're not together, we always try to have a united front on issues, whether it's dealing with our son, a school, what have you. And you and I, as co-parents and step-parents, we both believe in having a united front. And even if we don't agree maybe privately on an issue, when we face our children or whatever, you and I always manage to be on board.
Right.
In front of them.
You have to be.
You have to be. Like, anytime you let this kind of thing happen, it really can create a huge rift in relationship.
Well, that's just like, if your kids get in the habit of, they ask mom or dad, if they can do something, they're always like, no, you can't, or whatever. But then they go ask the other parent.
Undermining.
Yeah, that's totally
authority.
Undermining each other's authority. And this is the type of thing that can cause a significant rift in a relationship.
Meredith, on the other hand, had like a good childhood. She learned to read at 4 and was an avid reader. Like, even as a little kid, she really loved reading Babar. Did you ever read Babar? The little elephant?
Yeah, I remember Babar.
The Babysitter's Club. Like, she was all into reading. Her parents gave her almost anything she wanted materially. If she wanted a new big wheel, she wanted Barbie dolls. Her father was a long-haul trucker and drove big rigs. So to make it up to her, he was not home very often. He often bought Meredith gifts. Meredith took her parents' divorce as a young teenager particularly hard because they'd really had a good marriage and their divorce was amicable. The issue was that, Doug was on the road all the time and his wife needed companionship.
Right.
So it just wasn't really working out for them. But Meredith, she really took this hard, and it gave her some trust issues because she felt like, well, if the people I love the most are going to do this to me, what will strangers do? That, coupled with the fact that she'd struggled with her weight and was often picked on, she had low self-esteem issues. And while she made good grades and was in honor classes and everybody thought Meredith was a good girl, that was a facade, Dylan. Meredith was actually kind of a hard-drinking girl who smoked pot a lot. She had a reputation for being a burnout. She smoked pot like every day.
Damn.
In class, she was always stoned. It became like a running joke that like, oh, look at Meredith, she's high. While the Robertsons raised their sons to be productive, upstanding citizens, by 1994, Jimmy was just out of control. He was diagnosed in August of that year with bipolar disorder. Jimmy was prescribed lithium, but decided on his own that it was ineffective and stopped taking it.
Yeah.
And by then, Chip had graduated and gone off to the University of Pennsylvania. Earl told Jimmy after flunking out of college that he could live at home, but he was responsible for paying for things like health insurance, clothing, incidentals. Jimmy liked working in restaurants, but he couldn't hold down jobs for very long. He would skip from like Papa John's to McDonald's to Pizza Hut, and he would either fail drug tests or would just have other problems that got him fired within just a few weeks.
Antisocial behavior. No impulse control.
Yeah, can't follow the rules. Doesn't like authority. Thinks he's the smartest guy in the room. In March of 1995, Jimmy Robertson visited a therapist. It was determined that he had an IQ of 140. He told the therapist that he had never had relationships with girls and that he had been sexually molested within the last year.
Really?
But he didn't divulge who had sexually molested him. Jimmy also admitted that he was a, quote, chronic gambler. He went to therapy a few times a week for about 2 months, allowed his father to handle his paychecks, his money, and during this time, their relationship seemed to improve. They were getting along. Things seemed to be going, pretty well, kind of normal for once. Earl even took Jimmy to the Masters tournament in Georgia, the golf tournament. Jimmy was talking about going back to school. I mean, he seemed to be making real improvements with this therapist. Now, Terry, seeing these improvements with her son, decided she would start seeing the same therapist.
Oh, so it's like this therapist is a good therapist.
Yeah, I guess so. Terry had been feeling depressed. She was insecure about weight gain. She had once been very trim, and she had gained like what she said was 80 pounds, from her youth, which I'm like, hey, she's in her late 40s. It happens to us all. Happens to the best of us. And she thought Earl might be cheating. Now, whether that's just a thought in her head or a real thing, I don't know. She said there were days she thought about taking her own life. But Terry never shared any of these feelings with her friends. But she's got a lot going on. I mean, she's got this son who's like kind of out of control. And then she's got her own personal issues. And her boys are both older, so she's got empty nest syndrome. She needs, she doesn't have a career. She doesn't have her boys, and her whole life's revolved around taking care of other people. So she's kind of feeling like, what's my purpose?
Yeah, I guess if you've been a homemaker, for either the man or the woman, you've been a homemaker all those years, a big chunk of your adult life, and now it's almost like you're not needed anymore. So I guess I could see you feeling lost or really getting a bad case of empty nest syndrome.
By late summer, Jimmy had been arrested for DUIs 3 times in a 6-week period.
How do you even do that?
He was living in his parents' basement with no prospects. When Terry asked him if he was going to be able to make a rent payment in late August, Jimmy threw a fit, and it was scary. Terry feared for her life. The docile Terry, who enabled her son to no end, decided to call police. She explained that Jimmy was on drugs and had threatened her, but she refused to file charges against him. Instead, she sent police to pick him up at work and have him involuntarily committed to the state mental hospital. Doctors said he had a tremendous amount of aggression and had acting out potential, which meant that he could potentially be dangerous and hurt someone.
Right.
They said, quote, he seems to have very poor emotional control. The Robertsons didn't know how to help him, but they were trying. They were also afraid that their son was going to hurt them.
I couldn't imagine being scared of your own child.
No.
I mean, that'd be very worrisome.
There's a movie called, I think we need to talk about Kevin. It's like the name of the film, and it's this mother, and she's concerned about her son's increasingly frightening behavior. And that movie is like, I remember it like left a mark. I haven't seen it in years, but it like left a mark. Like, it's very scary to think you have to lock your bedroom door because your kid might come in and kill you while you're asleep.
Oh,
right?
No.
I mean, damn. In December of 1995, 4 months after Jimmy was released from the mental hospital, Terry admitted herself. She was struggling with suicidal ideations. Terry had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder as well. She also had obsessive compulsive disorder. She spent nearly 2 weeks in the hospital, and I should note that her sons didn't visit her the whole time she was in the hospital. Like, Earl visited her quite often, but her boys never came to see her.
That says a lot.
By spring, Earl and Terry were still fighting about whether they should kick Jimmy out of the house. So back in August, when Jimmy had been hospitalized, everyone had mutually agreed that it would be best if Jimmy found another place to live, yet he was still in the basement. Jimmy and Meredith had met through her best friend, Erin, and Erin had kind of dated him briefly. They had broken up. Her parents absolutely didn't want her to see Jimmy because, you know, he's a troubled kid. So Meredith's kind of hanging out with him, but she says their relationship's never defined. Like, she doesn't know if she's his girlfriend. They hang out. They spend a lot of time together. She says she feels like Jimmy cares about her, but they're kind of in a weird situationship.
A situationship?
Yeah, as the kids say. But Meredith had seen like brief moments of his explosive temper where he would just snap and go off on somebody and try to fight them or just kind of act a fool, right? Terry was feeling very unhappy in the marriage. She felt that she and Earl rarely spoke, that Earl was only interested in work and golf. He flirted with other women. Terry wasn't really interested in sex anymore, so she was worried that Earl was having an affair because she wasn't feeling intimate, you know, having those feelings at that moment. And Earl had always been a very excellent provider, and she had never had to worry about anything, always got to stay home, you know, had anything she wanted kind of situation. But Terry was questioning whether it was time to end their marriage. When Jimmy steals some more checks from Terry, he cashes some checks in the amount of $200. She's assuming that he's buying drugs or alcohol, and she's really worried about Earl finding out.
She should be more worried that he's buying drugs or alcohol.
So around this time, Earl starts going to counseling with the same therapist that Terry is seeing and Jimmy was seeing. But by now, Jimmy stopped going to therapy, I should mention.
Now, I almost think there's an issue, a conflict of interest.
You think maybe?
With a therapist seeing that many members of a family.
I don't know. Maybe.
Or do you think that could give them some type of insight?
Maybe it would go, maybe. But you know, you can have family therapy where everybody goes together.
Right.
So I don't know. I don't know how that works.
It could be a good thing or maybe a bad thing.
I'm not smart enough to be a therapist, so I don't know.
I could be a therapist.
Not me.
Well, yeah, because
I'm not good with dealing with people. I'd be like 50 feet away, like poking them with a stick, like, there.
I think
Please
maybe,
stop crying.
maybe I'd be too brutally honest
It
with
makes me
them.
feel uncomfortable.
You know how they everything's like, well, you know.
How does that make you feel?
Yeah.
Let's give you some coping strategies. See, I would be too honest too, because I'd be like, bitch, what you doing? Break up with that fool.
But did that piss you off? Because I understand how that might piss you off.
Yeah, we would be terrible therapists.
Oh, that's what we can do. Mountain murders therapy.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's great. You gotta we'll do like a Dear Abby, Dear Mountain Murders. You can write in and we'll give you advice.
Dude, hey, we need to actually do that.
mountainmurderspodcast@gmail.com.
That'd be a great segment on the midweek.
We'll give you some real good fucking advice. So Earl starts counseling. He had his own frustrations. I mean, Terry's feeling her feels. Jimmy's doing his thing. But, Earl's human too. He's just a man, Dylan.
No, and I could imagine the type of job he has and where he's climbed the ladder. That comes with a lot of pressure.
Well, it does. I mean, he was feeling frustrated. He'd worked really hard and saved a good amount of money, but that made him feel disconnected from his wife because he worked so much. He was upset because Terry didn't cook or keep house, which he felt like, if I'm out earning the money and you're staying at home, like, you should have the house clean and I should have a warm meal on the table.
I agree with that.
I mean, I do too.
And that's not a sexist thing. I just feel like,
well, if one of the partners stays at home,
right, whoever stays at home
because the household is like your job, right?
And it is a job.
It is. How much time do I spend cleaning house and stuff?
It's work every day.
I mean, I've noticed just since I've been in school, which has only been a few days, I'm like, I freak out because I'm like, oh my God, our house is like in disarray. And then you're like, it's really not. But I'm just so accustomed to like getting up every day and cleaning and doing my chores.
That's right. You better have my hot food ready when I get home.
Whatever, you cook dinner tonight.
No, well, we were sick too, and we've been kind of down. But what have I told you? It's just shows me how much you do.
You do.
On a
you
daily
did say
basis.
that.
As I sat there and not do it, but I'm like, wow, you really do a lot. I can tell when you don't do it.
But I'd like to keep house.
Oh, I love cleaning. And stuff.
I mean, my thing is like, I like, if I'm here, I like having my house in a particular order.
But I think as a partnership, I think
Well, it shouldn't just be on one person.
no, and that doesn't mean the person who's out there out and about should like not lift a finger either.
No, I don't. No, I don't agree
think
with
that's
that.
a poor, and people get to live their life the way that works for them. But just refusing to do anything around the house, I think is kind of weird. I think it's just you should lay in there and help each other. But I also think it is just a respect thing both ways. Is if you get to stay at home, because it has its pros.
Well, it almost sounds
cons.
like at this point, and I don't know if Terry had like maybe a history of not really cooking and cleaning the house, or if it was a more recent development because she's dealing with her own issues.
Right.
I mean, she's got severe depression and then mania. And it's just like this vicious cycle she's caught up in.
Well, yeah, there could have been many times where she had a hot dinner waiting and the Earl didn't make it because he's late at work.
Well, there's that.
There's things that
That's the thing is
slowly
if you're not
erode.
communicating, like both sides, couples have their own feelings about situations, and that's why communication is so important. You got to talk about these things with your partner, right?
Right.
Well, he also felt like his sons disrespected him, and all he really wanted to do was play golf because that was the only time he was happy. He told the therapist sometimes he felt like going to sleep and not waking up.
Oh, wow.
Then in July, Jimmy broke into the neighbor's house. So afterwards, the Robertsons learned that Jimmy had been using crack and that Chip was also using drugs.
So both their sons are using drugs.
Yes. So this is kind of the situation leading up to Jimmy going to prison and then getting out and then the murders. So in July, that's when he broke into the neighbor's house. They find out he's using crack, that he stole all that the credit card and all of the merchandise because he was going to sell it for drugs. They find out Chip's also using drugs and drinking. Earl and Terry are mortified. I mean, they were like, how do we face our friends and neighbors after our son has stolen from them?
Yeah, that would be very embarrassing.
They began withdrawing from activities. Earl wasn't as social at work. He mostly just stayed in his office and didn't chat like he just wasn't himself. They stopped going to church and Sunday school. Terry stopped telling friends about their private lives. Like when she did have conversations with her friends, it was kind of superficial. Terry was feeling a lot of guilt because she thought, like, this is my fault. I'm his mother. Like, this is all my fault. Like, what did I do wrong? Her depression was unbearable. Again, she stopped cleaning the house. Her medicine cabinet overflowed with like all these different prescriptions. She felt like she was fat and gaining more weight. She started hoarding. She would just buy stuff and leave it in the bags, just sitting around the house. Like, wouldn't even take it out of the bag and put it away. So there were just like all these bags where she'd been shopping just everywhere, which seemed like a kind of a development that just recently started when all this trouble started. Well, and they say that, when you watch like hoarders, that there's typically some sort of traumatic event that kind of kicks off this desire to hold on to things.
Yeah, and I think that also boils down to control on some level,
And the thing is, Terry's recognizing all of this behavior, but it's like she can't make herself stop doing it.
And I understand that feeling to a degree, dealing with the depression or self-destructive behaviors.
Yeah.
Knowing the entire time that what you're doing is not right for whatever reason, many reasons. And
but feeling kind of powerless, like you can't stop.
Or not wanting to.
Yeah.
Not wanting to bad enough.
Yeah, I understand. Earl resented the visits to prison that they had when they had to go visit Jimmy. He's resenting this. He's feeling really angry and embarrassed having to explain to people, like, my son's in jail.
Well, look, you take square people, and I just mean normal people, really, who never dealt with jail or any of that. It's pretty wild experience.
I think most people don't want to visit their son in prison. I mean, that's like the last thing as a parent you want is for your child to end up behind bars.
Now, though your child is responsible solely for their own behavior, and I know as a parent, you're like, what did I do wrong? But at the end of the day, it's really on your child. Honestly, they're making the choices, they're choosing to do these things. But yeah, I'm sure you feel like a failure or like you failed your child, if you will.
So a few weeks before Jimmy is going to get out of prison, Earl gets news that his business, his job, they want to transfer him to Mexico City.
Oh, no.
Well, Earl's kind of excited because he thought, this is a new opportunity. Maybe Terry and I will go and kind of be able to start fresh in a new place. It's exciting. We'll have adventures, kind of this whole new thing. But Terry was concerned. She had actually lived abroad as a child. Her father was in the military. She had lived in like France and had been overseas. And she was really worried about what would become of Jimmy if she and Earl went to Mexico. Jimmy's prison record was not good. And I mentioned this before. I mean, he had fights and other infractions. So how they let him out after 10 months on a 6-year sentence is beyond me.
I mean, honestly, maybe he needed that time in prison to
yeah,
figure his shit out.
If he had served the full sentence, his parents wouldn't be dead, most likely.
Right.
Jimmy moved in with a roommate, but was drinking and partying, doing drugs. Terry was worried about both Chip and Jimmy because they were struggling with drugs and alcohol. She begged both of them to get into AA, but they refused. She also found out that they were abusing Chip's Ritalin that he had been prescribed for his ADD. They were snorting it like cocaine. And the thing is, they were able to get just order it and get boxes and boxes and boxes of it. And that'll come up later in the investigation is how were these boys able to get just tons of Ritalin?
Yeah, it seems weird.
Earl nearly blew his top when he learned that Chip hadn't been going to class and had missed over 2 weeks of school and was about to be kicked out of college.
Well,
Following in his brother's footsteps.
Well, I guess he figured, at least my one son's doing good at school, making good grades.
Yeah, I was going to like this, kind of Ivy League school, the Wharton School of Business. I mean, that's like a pretty fancy school. Now, it didn't take long for Jimmy's roommate to tire of the drug use and the constant parties and people in and out. He was like worried he was going to get in trouble, that he could lose his lease or law enforcement would come. He was just really worried. So he told Jimmy that he needed to leave. So that's when Jimmy would return to his parents' house, where he would live for 4 days before his parents were murdered. Now, Earl is very resentful at this time because he doesn't understand why his 24-year-old son can't even maintain a place to live.
Well, when you keep lowering the bar and your expectations, and then they continue to not live up to them, everybody has a breaking point. Like, really, you can't even do the bare basics for yourself.
Earl felt like he was always the bad guy, according to his wife and sons. Earl also felt that his sons had, quote, ruined his life, and he just felt hopeless. Because he's like, I've worked so hard. I feel like I've done everything I can to give these boys, everything they could want and need to be successful.
Right.
And they both are just they're shitting on me.
Oh, gosh.
They're shitting on it. Now, in court, Jimmy would face off against a prosecutor named Tommy Pope, who was well known because he had recently sent Susan Smith to prison.
Oh, wow.
Meredith had spent Thanksgiving and Christmas in jail, so she was pretty eager to be extradited back to South Carolina, and by then she was willing to work with authorities.
Oh, she was in county jail, too.
In Philadelphia?
They say that county jail is worse than prison, right?
Meanwhile, Jimmy had been writing his brother Chip asking for, quote, a top-notch attorney. He wrote, "What's done is done," and demanded $175,000 to hire a lawyer.
Does Chip have $175K laying around?
Well, their parents' estate is, I guess, in probate.
Right.
It's going through the channels.
Oh, and since Jimmy's been accused of murdering them, he can't access any of the funds, but maybe Chip can.
Yeah, well, Chip's not replying, not responding. He's not hearing from Chip. Chip's iced him out.
Well, you killed our parents, bro.
He's a chip of ice. He's iced him out. Now, Jimmy writes the financial advisor that's handling the case and is like demanding this man give him money for a lawyer. Jimmy wrote a neighbor and was asking for copies of articles written about the case, and was also asking, so how's the new Pearl Jam record?
Okay.
Like, you've murdered your parents and you're sitting in jail awaiting trial, and that's what you're worried about? Don't call me daughter. Oh, I thought you were going to say something.
Jeremy
You're just looking at me like, shut up. I know. I sound like an old goat.
Yesterday. Oh, sorry.
Well, here's the thing. So after the Robertsons were murdered, Chip didn't go back to school. He stayed in the family home. He did go to Georgia to be with his grandmother for like just a few days. And Chip was entertaining friends at the house and reportedly showing off the blood spatter.
Oh, God.
Like at parties, people would say, can we go see? And he'd be like, yeah, okay. Because the house hadn't professionally been cleaned and wouldn't be until February. And it would cost $9,500
Damn.
to clean the crime scene. So the will was set up that it allowed for the mortgages, because they had a home in South Carolina and a home in Michigan, that the mortgages would continue to be paid on the two houses, and that Chip would get like a monthly allowance to kind of cover electric and bills, you know, like a little subsidy, if you will.
Okay.
Jimmy, he's so unhinged. So he's writing all these like letters to people, making all these demands from jail, like he's going to do something. And he sends a note to Meredith. Now she's in the female jail, and all it says is, go fuck yourself. And she gets this letter, At that point, she's like, no, you go fuck yourself. And that's when she's like, plea deal. I'm working with investigators. Let's make a deal.
I'll tell you everything.
Exactly. The prosecution framed Jimmy Robertson as a spoiled, greedy man intent on killing his parents to inherit $2 million. It would have been more, but it was about $1.5 million. He thought it was $2 million, and it would have been if the life insurance policies had paid out. But because they were murdered, they didn't pay out. The trial began May 15th of 1999. A court TV film crew set up and filmed the trial for broadcast. Meredith Moon, by that time, had made a deal. She would plead guilty to lesser charges and get a reduced sentence for her testimony against Jimmy. Meredith was feeling a lot more confident. I mean, even from jail, she had managed to lose over 100 pounds.
Damn.
During the time she was in jail. She had done a lot of soul searching and felt incredible remorse for not helping the Robertsons. The trial didn't go well for Jimmy. Plenty of witnesses testified how he had discussed killing his parents. They said Jimmy was a drug addict and an alcoholic, and there's a lot of proof of that. And then, of course, Meredith's testimony outlined the events of the murders. The crime scene photos were not allowed as evidence in the guilt phase of the trial, but they could be shown during the penalty phase. The defense jumped in trying to explain why Jimmy had killed his parents. A doctor, who, by the way, was paid $4,000, not for the testimony, Dylan, but for the exam.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. This psychiatrist testified that Jimmy's frontal lobes were not properly working. Jimmy had also taken 10 times the normal dose of Ritalin, and he didn't have a prescription for it. He had snorted 10 times the dose on the night of the murders, and that he had only had 3 hours of sleep in 36 hours because he was having a bout of mania.
Well, it's probably if he stopped snorting the Ritalin, maybe he could go to sleep.
Jimmy had told this doctor that Earl had physically abused him at least once a week from the ages of 5 to 15, and that Terry would intervene, and then it would cause like a whole big family fight. But yeah, he was paid all this money, but of course it was not for his testimony. Another doctor said that Terry and Earl had showered with the boys up until they were 11 and 12 years old and believed that sexual abuse had taken place. The defense tried saying that the Robertsons' household was incredibly dysfunctional, and that's what drove Jimmy to kill his parents. The prosecution dispelled the notion that Jimmy Roberts had only been violent due to drug psychosis, as he had beaten his brother regularly and long before the Ritalin entered the picture.
Yeah, and at the same, Ritalin is, I'm not saying you should, crush 3 or 4 up and snort them. I'm sure that's not good for you, but it's also not meth or heroin or coke. You know what I'm saying? It's not the heaviest of drugs. I mean, I guess it's some form of speed, but well, maybe it is meth.
Well, I guess it's an amphetamine, right?
Yeah, but you know what I mean.
Right.
I don't know if you could get a drug-induced psychosis from something like that.
The defense tried to paint Terry as this mentally ill, abusive, just absolutely horrible mother. But the prosecution pointed out that her medical records reflected that the last 3 years of her life, she was under severe emotional distress, and that it was mostly due to Jimmy's behavior. He also pointed out that Robertson had worn socks on his hands when he had killed his parents to prevent fingerprints, because he had premeditated the killings, and that it was not an impulse or due to drugs, because if he was in a drug psychosis, he wouldn't have thought to cover the tracks.
Right.
He wouldn't have tried to clean up the crime scene as little as he did. He wouldn't have bagged up all that shit and put it in a garbage bag and thrown it out in Maryland, right? So a guilty verdict comes in. The jury had the choice to decide like if Jimmy would receive the death penalty or get life in prison. Meredith Moon would receive 10 years for armed robbery and 10 years for each charge of accessory after the fact, but she would actually only, so I guess one of those was a suspended sentence, so she really only got 10 years.
Damn.
I don't think she even served all of that. She was also going to get credit for the 16 months that she had already served. The jury only took 3 hours and 45 minutes to decide Jimmy's fate, and he was given the death penalty in both murders. Terry's friend, Linda Weaver, said, quote, "For once in his life, he's going to have to pay for what he's done."
Damn.
Now, here's the thing, Dylan. Chip Robertson learned his brother's fate while he was sitting in the York County Jail. He had been caught allegedly selling cocaine and Xanax and was also charged with forgery. Though Chip was in the same jail as his brother, because he didn't have anybody to make that $70,000 bond that he needed, he actually never saw or spoke to his brother again.
Really?
Yeah. So he never spoke to Jimmy again, even though they're in the same jail. Chip was given 5 years probation, and said that in the end that the arrest actually saved his life because he was on this really bad path.
Well, it sounds
of
like
self-destruction.
Yeah.
He was also sent to court-ordered rehab, which would be paid by his parents' estate. And in the end, once taxes and everything, was settled, he got about $665,000 from his parents. Jimmy complained to a social worker that his parents' friends didn't visit him in jail. And he was like, "I don't understand. I lost 2 parents."
This guy.
Yeah, because you killed them.
I mean, really.
He's such a shitbird.
He is a shitbird.
As of 2024, 50-year-old Jimmy Robertson's case remains on appeal at the moment. The Supreme Court has ruled executions can resume, so no one knows what will become of Jimmy Robertson. The state spends about $17,000 a year to house him.
Which is $17,000 too much.
Yeah. So that has been the story of Jimmy. And my book was written, my main resource, was written by Lynn Robertson. She's actually a resident of South Carolina. And it was called Family Blood, The Murder That Shattered an All-American Family. Also, there are quite a bit of news articles out there since this did happen in 97. You can still access a lot of the archives.
And I'm sure it was a pretty big story when it happened.
Oh, it was a huge story. Absolutely. Thanks for sitting down with me today, Dylan.
And thank you. And this just goes to show you, man. Sometimes you're living with the monster.
Yeah. And it goes back to that argument, is it nature versus nurture? Because you have situations where someone grows up in like just an absolutely horrific situation and then they become a shitbird because, it's like, oh, well, I've got all this trauma or whatever. But then you have somebody who grows up in a nice middle-class family. Parents are, good parents, active, and you still turn out to be a shitbird. It's almost like these kinds of kids are so spoiled and coddled and enabled, and they're, they never do anything wrong, and their parents always save them and make excuses for them, and then they just grow up thinking everybody owes them something.
Yeah, and I've come to the belief it's nature and nurture,
Yeah,
a combination. And it's also the willingness of a person to do certain things and act a certain way.
Well, yeah, and I think, you can say a person has, I'm not going to say you can blame, but you can say, hey, a person has this mental illness, this diagnosis, and it can cause them to behave in these certain ways. But I also think a lot of these people lean into this bad behavior and then blame it. We covered the case of and I can't even think of the guy's name now, but in New York City, wealthy family murdered his dad and just kind of like leaned into mental illness. It was always an excuse why he couldn't hold a job or whatever, but he could go surf.
Yeah. Look, there's thousands, maybe even millions of people out there dealing with similar mental health issues.
Yeah.
And they don't do these things. So
No.
I'm sorry, they don't. That's not to say that some mental health issues can affect you or cause you to maybe react a certain way in certain situations. But at the end of the day, I think it just comes down to personal choices.
Well, you make a personal choice to stop taking your medication.
Yeah.
That's helpful. That prevent, that's like gonna balance your mood or whatever. And then you say, oh, well, I've decided I'm not going to take it.
Well, when you have these violent outbursts, you see your whole family's trying to do everything they can to help you. I mean, at what point do you just take a step back and say, wow, I need to really straighten my bullshit up?
Well, and there's a lot of people who think that Jimmy, of course, during trial, that they tried to throw Terry and Earl under the bus
I was
and really
thinking
tarnish
character
their
assassination the whole time.
Yes, absolutely.
And they were no way could defend themselves.
Right. And a lot of folks are like, that's total bullshit. And none of that went on in their household. Like, that was BS. So who knows?
Well, thank you for that, Heather. Glad that you're finally rounded the corner.
Thank you.
Your, monkey flu or whatever.
I don't know what I have.
And thanks to our listeners and all our patrons. We appreciate you guys. Sorry it's been a little hit or miss lately. And if this episode sounds weird, I think my mic's being funky. Going to order a new microphone, and we can do that because of the support of our patrons.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you so much.
Hope everybody has a great couple of days, and we will see you on the midweek.
Yeah, we're going to get a midweek in this time.
Bye, Dylan.
Bye.